يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. قال الله في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ قال لقمان لابنه وهو يعظه: يا بني لا تشرك بالله إن الشرك لظلم عظيم. And when Luqmán said to his son while he was instructing him, O my son, do not associate anything with Allah. Indeed, association with Him is a great injustice. صدق الله العلي العظيم. طيبوا أفواهكم بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. When we look at human history, we see a clear truth that every era there is a form of an idol that takes place. It is not always something that is a jamad or something that is an object, but sometimes it can be of like something of inside ourselves, like pride, ego, or fear. And sometimes just being silent in the face of injustice causes us and is an act and is a signal of an idol. The questions that we get in our daily lives, for example, is who do we worship? When we look at the ayah, when he said, Ya bunay la tushrik billah, O my beloved son, do not associate partners with Allah. We see that it wasn't just a fatherly reminder, it wasn't just an advice to his son, but it was the foundation of resistance, which we see is the same message that Imam Hussain alayhi afdalu salatu wassalam carried with him in Muharram. It is the root of our courage, and it is verily the spark of Karbalāʼ. Insha'Allah, for the next 8 nights, it will be the beginning of a lecture series in which we will explore the advice that Luqmān al-Hakim had given his son and be able to interpret it into our daily lives. In which we can see how can a man who was neither a prophet or a Rasul or an Imam gain such a status in the name of Allah, such a high martaba, that he was nicknamed Luqmān al-Hakim, and he was given a page and a half in the Holy Qur'an associated to him. This is not just a mere man of nothing, but he must have been a man of such high appearances in Allah Azza wa Jal, that Allah would give him such a status. And insha'Allah, throughout every night we will pair one of Luqmān's pieces of advice to his son with the example of a figure of Karbalāʼ and how that figure possesses that piece of advice. Tonight, our journey is divided into 3 parts. Number 1, we need to understand first who was Luqmān and why does Allah preserve his advice in the Qur'an. Number 2, what does the advice do not commit shirk, la tushrik billah, really mean for us? Especially brothers and sisters, we know we live in a time where we are in a Western ideology. There are certain things that the world tries to put on us as Shia Muslims that we can't stand by, we must preserve. We must not stand by this. And number 3, how does this advice connect to the sacrifice of Muslim ibn Aqeel, the brave ambassador of Imam Hussain, who was sent to Kufa? We will start this with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We understand, brothers and sisters, through a beautiful hadith by Imam Sadiq alayhi afdalu salati wassalam, in which he says, Wallah ma utiya Luqmān al-hikmata limal wala hasab wala nasab ولكنه كان رجلا قويا في طاعة الله ساكتا متفكرا كثيرا العبر طوبا له. By Allah, Luqmān was not given wisdom because of wealth or status or lineage. He was a man in strong obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal, quiet and reflective and full of lessons and glad tidings to him. Luqmān al-Hakim, he earned his title of wise al-Hakim through action, not position. When we look at his life, even though history unfortunately doesn't have a lot of text about him, but from what historians tell us, he tells us that Luqmān was a man who lived in Africa, in a place that was known called Anibia. And he was a person who was a very mere position. He wasn't high, but he was known for his manners. He was known by his akhlaq. He was known to be humble. And so this gave him the position in front of the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal to be al-Hakim. And we see this, that this came from the center of Tawheed. His Tawheed is Rabbil Alameen. If I ask you a question now, why is it when he started giving advice to his son, why did he decide, let me start with La tushrik billah? Why didn't he tell him, Aqim as-salat first? Why didn't he tell him, Ati zakat? Why did he start, La tushrik billah? We see when we give what belongs to Allah, our heart, our trust, our love, besides anything else. For example, unfortunately, brothers and sisters, when we look at life, people say they believe in Allah, but yet when you look at them, you see as if they don't believe in Allah. So we see that great injustice of shirk is not just against God, but against our own soul, our nafs. Because as we know, our brain must be over our nafs, because if our nafs becomes over, it says in the Qur'an, النفس الأمارة بالسوء. Our soul, if it comes over us, then it gets everything in the name of Allah, and Allah no longer becomes the one that we associate things with. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Now that we have understood who Luqmān al-Hakim is, we can look into the second part of our lecture. And that is, how do we look at the way in our Western ideology? Now we can look at shirk through two powerful examples, and inshallah it clears to us why shirk is a grave injustice. Number one, for example, we see that Imam Ali alayhi salam, الشرك أخفى من دبيب النمل. Shirk is more hidden than the footsteps of an ant. An ant that is such a tiny creature. But shirk is greater than that. So it's even more tinier. So it must be much greater. For example, if we look at a student who, for example, during Salah and Salatul Dhuhr, they want to pray, but they feel pressured by society that if they were to see them pray, it would change the way they interpret them. For example, he feels, what if someone sees me? What if they mock me? What if, for example, the school is Sunnis and they see a Shia praying? He feels afraid that they're going to make fun of him. So he starts, you know what? They choose to accept over Allah. So we have two types of people. Either the person who says, I will not pray because I'm afraid of what society. And this is where he would commit shirk. This is not a big shirk, but it will be considered as a soft shirk. It would lead you to the steps of big shirk. However, if we look at the other person who would say, you know what, I will pray and I don't care what other people are going to say. I'm doing this for Allah and Allah only. I'm not doing it for anyone else. And this is the real person. They have accepted what Allah wanted. When we ask Allah as well, for example, when we see, do you fear them? We tell to the people, we don't fear Allah because Allah has more right over us. Allah owns our bodies. We are merely people who we are loaning these bodies from Allah in this world, and then we are going to return them back to Him. And that we need to know. Now, our final part of the lecture is to understand how this advice of staying away from shirk, we can tie it to Muslim ibn Aqeel. Now Muslim ibn Aqeel, he lived a life of pure tawheed. His tawheed was 100% khalis liwajhillah. He lived the life of la tushrik billah. He was the first shaheed of the mission of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Muslim ibn Aqeel was not just an ambassador, but he was a man of a complete trust. He had tawakkul in Rabbil Alameen. We see the complete trials that he went with in his life. When he was in Kufa, when he was told, come Muslim ibn Aqeel, we want you to come. We are ready for Imam al-Hussain. But when Yazid brought out the money and the seized control, and he overthrew the governor of Kufa, people became scared. And this shows us, brothers and sisters, that these people, did not have real tawheed in Rabbil Alameen. Because if you had real tawheed, you would believe that no matter what's to happen, Imam Hussain is the one on the true path. Imam Hussain is the one of haqq, and we must go towards the haqq. You know, he entered Kufa, he was greeted by the thousands, but when Imam al-Hussain was going to come, he sent a letter and he said, do not come, someone go over to him. And he told him that they killed Muslim ibn Aqeel. And this was because when we look at the story, we see that Muslim ibn Aqeel had arrived to the city of Kufa with the letters that the Kufis had sent to him. But then when the anger came in and no one wanted to house Muslim ibn Aqeel, he wandered through the streets that were promised to him. The streets that were told, O Muslim ibn Aqeel, we are opening our hearts for you. We know that Muslim ibn Aqeel had arrived in Kufa as the trusted representative of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, tasked with preparing the city for his master's arrival. At first, the people welcomed him warmly, and he found refuge in the home of a noble woman named Taw'a. And Taw'a was a revered woman in Islam because she helped Muslim ibn Aqeel. But unfortunately, we know the story that her son, who liked the sulta and he wanted the money, he was more associated with that than the true path of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. And I want to turn our eyes to one of the most heart-wrenching moments when Muslim ibn Aqeel was taken to Qasr al-Kufa and Qasr al-Imara, and he was killed and thrown his body was dragged. I want to take our heads a beautiful second to where we take our heads to Imam al-Hussain alayhi afdal salatu wassalam. Now think a daughter, Hamida, who was taken in the care of Imam al-Hussain, waiting eagerly for her father to return, only to hear the news that her father had passed away. We said that the Imam had embraced the child, gently patting her on her head. A tender moment of compassion amidst the darkness. She looked up and said, "Oh Father, why do you pat my head just like someone who is an orphan?" She then asked, "How long until my father returns?" He replied, "Your father is with the righteous, standing for truth and justice. He is not lost. He sacrificed himself for the life of Aba Abdullah." قعدت توين والناشديدة من اجت عد عمها حميدة تقل يا عمي أبويا أريد أشوف سفرت صارت بعيدة أشوف سفرت صارت بعيدة. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعافية لله.